good to be back. It's good to see everybody here and online as well. So Lee and I took a vacation. We did some amazing traveling. We went to Chicago for a few days, then we went to Milwaukee for a few days, and even spent a day up in Madison. So it's a great time. We get to pause, we get to re-energize, we get to do everything that we love to do. And it was just absolutely fantastic. And today's talk is actually called Walking a Sacred Path. The title itself comes from this idea that should we decide, we can make our life about walking a sacred path with the divine, if that's what we want to do. But the choice is ours. In other words, it has to come from within yourself if that's what you're wanting to have or what you're wanting to experience. God's not going to show up one day at your lap and all of a sudden go, here you go. It's time to start living this divine life. That is not the way that it works, I would say, for the majority of us. What I'm saying is there is a moment where you make a decision and you say, no, I am going to start taking or walking a sacred path. I'm going to start living this way. I'm going to start bringing the divine into my daily existence and start walking a sacred path. And for me, it sounded something like this. I decide to have my divinity be my priority of my life, and I will not waver from that in any way, shape, or form. And I set out in my own way to make that happen to the best of my ability. In other words, every single moment, every single day, to the best of my ability, I am trying to bring in the divine and have the experience of my divinity. And I choose to have that be a focus of my life. The key with it is the sacred path is a journey. It's not like it happens all at one time. It happens moment by moment by moment. And it can change moment by moment by moment. We were giving some kind of an idea that, well, this idea of living the sacred path, what will happen is something outside of myself, something out there, some place or something is going to happen, and that's simply not the way that it works. It's an inward journey. In the book, The Flow of Life, Eric Butterworth explains it like this. It is probably true that the average person attempts to love their life from the outside in. Life for them is almost totally determined by what happens around them. Ask them, how are you? And they're reluctant to answer until they consult the news of the day, checks on the Dow Jones, gets the weather report, or praises the mood of the family or his office associates. Their life is almost totally outer directed, and they're caught up in the dilemma of whether to conform to the world outside or to spend their life resisting it. The great truth taught by all the mystics of all ages is life is lived from within out. This means the whole universe is concentrated at the point where you are. More than this, you are the universe expressing as you. You are its living enterprise. In other words, life is being lived through you. It forever stands behind you with its full resources. Think about that for a minute. So this thing called life is actually standing behind you with its full resources ready to express itself in the highest way that it can through you. That's how it works. However, the fullness of this universal support comes through you and not just to you. The profoundest knowledge that you can attain is that your whole existence flows forth inexorably from a universal process which is always from within out and not the other way around, which is the way most people live their life. In other words, they're going to look all the way around themselves and then tell you how they're doing. So it's backwards. That's how most people live their life. They do it backwards. And that's what Butterworth is talking about. Now, there's a practical way to experience the presence of God while you're on this sacred path. It's a little bit different. And as you allow God to guide you and be your moment-by-moment companion on your path, which if you decide and you want God to be your moment-to-moment companion, you can do that. You can do that. Mastering living in the now, taking time to see and to sense the miracles and the adventure in the present. So in other words, this life, this experience that we're having can be very, very, very magical. It can be. It's kind of what I was talking about earlier in the introduction. When you start to play with this stuff, life can become magical. And this should be our daily commitment, to walk in this magic. We're 100% responsible for healing the sense of anything that doesn't show up like that, which is normally coming down to one thing. It's a sense of separation from God. We experience and enjoy our path by practicing the presence of God. Anybody ever do that before? Practice the presence of God? There's a famous book written about it. Practicing the presence of God. You can do that. Why? Because of who and what you are. You can have that experience if that's what you choose to experience and that's what you choose to focus on. You can have that experience. We all know the 10 Commandments, right? We all know specifically the first one, I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. When you boil it down, those commandments are the promise of God. Metaphysically, Egypt represents the darkness of ignorance. Egypt represents living in an unawakened state, which, unfortunately, a lot of people do. And for a good chunk of my life, I would argue I did too. And what the verse is really saying when you read it and you interpret it metaphysically is that if you put me or God first, no other gods, no God of fear, no God of anger, no God of jealousy, or whatever the other God is, that God will lead you out of bondage. In other words, God will lead you back to an awakened state, which is a state of peace. It's a state of joy. It's a state of freedom. It's a state of love. Everything that everybody talks about, right? Isn't that what everybody wants when it comes right down to it? Yes, we all do. It's inside of our DNA to want that, naturally. But somewhere along the line, somebody told us that wasn't the case, that we just had to suck it up and deal with it. And we bought that line, hook, line, and sinker. We all did to a certain extent. And that's what this quote, that's what the 10 Commandments, that's what all the messages have been trying to tell us is, no, you don't have to live that way anymore. You don't, because of who and what you are. You don't. Our whole goal is to have a total awareness of the presence of God constantly and not have any sense that there is a separation between us and God. And we can all have that experience. We can. It's just that we believe that we can't. And so guess what? You're powerful creators. You're powerful beings. So you believe it, so that's what your experience is. But what I'm telling you is you could believe something differently. You can believe that you can have this moment-by-moment experience with God. You can believe that. Watch how your life changes. When you think about it, this is why the first of the 5 principles that unity has and teaches is there is only one presence and power, and that is God. That is why it's the first principle. That's why. Now, the mistake that some people make is they think that, well, if I decide to do this, then I should be experiencing joy all the time. And there should be no problems. And it's just going to be daisies and rainbows. Right? Well, not exactly. Spoiler alert, I got news for you. Just because you decide to walk a sacred path doesn't mean it's always going to be easy. It doesn't. In fact, I would say that walking a sacred path has been one of the most difficult things I could have ever have imagined. Why? Because ultimately when you're walking this path, what you realize is there's so much junk inside of here that needs to be cleared out in order to have the full expression of your divinity. So it takes a minute. And in the process of going through getting rid of that junk, stuff needs to come out. Eckhart Tolle used to say, if it went in with pain, it's got to come out with pain. And I kind of believe that. At least my experience has been that. But the beautiful thing is, when you know that you've got God by your side, it doesn't have to take forever to heal, to grow, to have the experience of your divinity. The thing that I have learned to start paying attention to is resistance or feeling separated. It's right then that we can experience the presence of God moving, acting, and being in my life. It's really exciting. It's really exciting because now when stuff shows up, I don't freak out. I don't go, oh my God, here we go again. I don't. I look at it as an opportunity to let go of more resistance that I have to experience my divinity and experiencing God. And perhaps the most important thing on this journey is the awareness that God is there no matter what it looks like. Knowing that God in the moment turns the moment and can turn it from something very dark into something light, so that there is a balance. I think about the time about 20 years ago when I got a tragic phone call at about 2 a.m. My 10-year-old nephew, Jonathan, was unfortunately killed in a house fire. And at the time, I was a Unity student, and I knew that there was both sides of it. I knew there had to be light in this moment of darkness. I knew it, I knew it, I knew it. And while I was going through my grieving process, and the family was going through the grieving process, I just kept telling God, where are you? I know you're here. Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? And I can remember as I started paying attention, I remember going to the funeral service, and all of a sudden my brother-in-law at the time, who was incarcerated, was let out. And I was sitting behind my sister and him at the time. And they had, and I got to hear a part of a magical conversation that touched my soul. The way that they were talking with each other, the way that they were bonding with each other and loving each other in this process of losing a son. It was magical. I remember the day after the house fire, driving by the house expecting to be in horror, and all of a sudden looking and seeing there was over 200 teddy bears that were sitting on the porch from all the students and the families that were sending their love and prayers. I was in tears. It brought me to tears. I just couldn't believe the outpouring. And then ultimately they set up a fund, and they raised over $25,000 for my sister and her family and allowed them to buy a home that they didn't have the money for. And so even in the moments of darkness, when we decide to look, where are you, God? Where are you, God? What I would say is God is there every single time. every single time. When we do that, when we choose that to be our focus, it's then that we discover the places where we have the most resistance are the places where we have the opportunity to make the greatest breakthroughs and really experience the presence of God working in our lives. And this gives us a greater awareness that God is really with us. Because in some cases, that's the biggest fear, that God's not here, that we have to do this alone. And that's not the case, ever. That's not the case. You know, it's interesting because when you look around at life, you understand that we come from a world of apparent contrast. And what I mean by that is there's this divide, but we forget about the divide that exists in nature. There's a natural polarity in life. The evening and the morning of the day are perfect examples of that polarity. Every aspect of our lives has the polarity. Think about it. There's always this opportunity, and we can see that there are parts that can come together as a spiritual whole, if that's what we decide to do, or we can see it as separation, if that's what we decide to do. And we go into fear, and we feel like we're going to be trapped forever on the wrong side of this divide. And so what we do is we buy into the night of life, thinking that it'll last forever, and forget that it's polarity, and it's in the darkness that holds the promise of a new day. Again, this is where we as unity people choose to remember that there's only one presence and one power. And this God, this divinity, is there equally and evenly present. There is no lack, ever. And if you choose, you can remember that. You don't have to. Nobody's going to force you to do it. Nobody. So there's either this joy-producing experience like I had with my nephew, and yeah, I grieved. And yes, there were tears, of course. But there was also another side that I think people often forget that's there. And they only look at the tragedy. They only look at the loss, the grief, the tears. But there's also the other side of it, which is the good side of it. So your path, the decision to walk a sacred path, you can have a joy-producing experience if that's what you choose, or a non-joy-producing experience. It's really up to the walker on the sacred path. So I'd like to read from you Khalil Gibran's The Prophet. And one of the elders of the city said, "Speak to us of good and evil." And he answered, "Of the good in you I can speak, but not of the evil. For what is evil but good tortured by its own hunger and thirst? Verily, when good is hungry, it seeks food, even in dark caves. And when it thirsts, it drinks even of dead waters. You are good when you are one with yourself. And when you are not one with yourself, you are not evil, not at all. For a divided house is not a den of thieves, it is only a divided house. And a ship without a rudder may wander aimlessly among perilous isles, yet sink not to the bottom. You are good when you strive to give of yourself, yet you are not evil when you seek gain for yourself. For when you strive for gain, you are but a root that clings to the earth and sucks at her breast. Surely the fruit cannot say to the root, 'Be like me, ripe and full, ever giving of your abundance.' For to the fruit, giving is a need as receiving is a need to the root. You are good when you are fully awake in your speech, yet you are not evil when you sleep while your tongue staggers without purpose. And even stumbling speech may strengthen a weak tongue. You are good when you walk to your goal firmly with bold steps, yet you are not evil when you go further limping. Even those who limp go not backwards. But you who are strong and swift, see that you do not limp before the lame, deeming it a kindness. You are good in countless ways, and you are not evil when you are not good. You are only loitering and sluggard. Pity the stags. A stag is a male deer that cannot teach swiftness to the turtles. In your longing for your giant self lies your goodness, and that longing is in all of you. But in some of you, that longing is a current rushing with might to the sea, carrying the secrets of the hillside and the songs of the forest. And in others, it is a flat stream that loses itself in the angles and bends, and lingers before it reaches the shore. And so as you listen to these verses, what you understand is you really can look at life in so many of those situations, and if you want to, you can pick either side of the equation. And my question to you is, which side is right and which side is wrong? A better question is, which side do you want to be on? Do you want to look at this as if it is negative and tragic and all of the above, which our society has a tendency to be focused on, or decide to realize that there really is no evil and that you can really live your life and choose it a different way, to look at it a completely and different way? And it all comes down to depending on which lens you decide to see life through. And the way that you choose to look through that lens, the lens that you choose is going to make all the difference in the world. As the saying goes, choose wisely. But you get to choose. You're the one that gets to choose. You. I just want to spend a few more minutes talking about this idea of resistance, because to me, in all of my spiritual journey, that is the thing that I keep coming back to that's teaching me, pay attention, Mike, pay attention, Mike, pay attention, Mike. Resistance. What does it look like? When you cut to the chase of it, it all comes down to fear. It might dress itself up as anger or jealousy, but we all know that it feels bad. So we guarantee that behind it, no matter what it is, no matter what the disruption in the force is, it comes down to fear. And there's an opportunity to be aware of when we're feeling the resistance. It's a sense of separation from God. Oh, so in other words, when I'm starting to feel resistance to something showing up, there's some form of separation that's going on. Yes. And in other words, I should pay attention to it. Yeah, you might want to pay attention to it. Why? Because you're ready to grow. You're ready to learn. You're ready to expand. And it's not a bad thing. It wouldn't be showing up for you if you weren't ready to do it. So instead of looking at this thing, whatever's showing up that you're resisting, as, oh no, not good, what if instead you said to yourself, oh my God, this is amazing. I must be ready to let this thing go once and for all. But we don't do that because that's not what we're taught. We're taught just the opposite. Resist, 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 resist. And it's these states of mind that you want to start paying attention to. The anger, the jealousy, the resentment, or whatever it is. All of them come down to fear. All of them. And they're really just dressed up ways of looking at the world. That's what it is. And when you start to put that together, and you start to walk a sacred path, you start to realize that your only work to do is to start paying attention when this resistance is showing up and understand that you can transform and change it, and you can heal it. That's the walk. That's the sacred path that once we decide to take, you're able to start to heal and remove any thoughts or any beliefs in separation. And that's when life gets to be really, really fun. That's when you walk out in the morning and you know what? No matter what happens, I don't care. Why? Because I got God. I have God. And when you can stand in that knowing, in that absolute knowing that no matter what happens, you've got God, game changer. Game changer. And what I'm here to tell you is that each and every one of you have the ability to be able to do that. That was the promise that Jesus made. This and greater things shall you do. That's what he said. That's what the Fillmores said. That's what they did. Again, and others, and others, and others, and others. They were all telling us the same thing. We're all divine. We all have the ability to tap into that divinity. And then we can have the experience of what it's like to live with that and walk in peace, and walk in joy, and walk in happiness. They never once said, that doesn't mean stuff's going to happen. They never said that. But they said that the way you'll be able to walk through it is going to be radically different than the current way that you're walking through it, which normally involves a lot of pain. Why? Because we're resisting whatever it is that we want to grow through. And instead of looking at it as a blessing, looking at it as a possibility to expand our own awareness, our own spiritual maturity, we don't. We resist it, we fight it, because we don't know how to process it. We haven't been taught. That's the beauty of unity. That's the beauty of what Jesus taught, when you really sit there and study what it is that he was really saying. And so as I start to bring the talk to a close, I welcome you if you decide to take the sacred path. If you decide to make a decision, I'm going to start walking a sacred path, and then just trusting yourself, trusting God, trusting the universe, that it's going to start bringing you stuff on a regular basis to heal. To heal any thought or belief in any separation between you and your divinity and God. That's ultimately what we are all doing. And that's the path. And it's a beautiful path. It's a sacred path. And for each and every one of us, it's going to look a little bit different. It is. My path is going to look different than Charles' path or Bill's path or Ray's path or whoever. It's going to look different. Why? Because we all have different things that we need to learn. We all were brought up differently. We all have different beliefs about who and what we are. We all have different beliefs on who and what God is. Some of them good. Some of them not so much. And there's no judgment there. We don't do shame. We don't do guilt. We don't do blame here. We don't. That's not how we grow. Not here. And so, I'm just really glad you're here. I'm really grateful for you spending some time with us this morning. It's great to see your faces. It's great to feel your energy. It's great to be able to share in these amazing teachings. And for those of you that decide to make it your sacred path, I welcome you. Let's sit down and have a cup of coffee. Let's go have a drink. Let's talk about this thing called life. This amazing dance that we could do with our divinity. Sometimes I think people, it freaks them out. They think they're going to wind up being a monk on the top of a mountain somewhere, and they got to say goodbye to their family and friends and everything else like that. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Jesus turned wine into water, or water into wine. Jesus liked to party. He did. He enjoyed life. He lived it. And in my experience, the more that I experience my own divinity, the more I will share with you that it becomes more and more and more of the greatest adventure that I could have ever have dreamed possible. Welcome to the adventure. God bless.